couple stories on Russia before I wrap up. Russia says it had 3 fighters escort a U.S. bomber, a B-52H, away from the Russian border. It's a strategic bomber, so I believe that means that this would be a bomber that could carry nuclear weapons, although, it probably wasn't. Doesn't seem like the biggest deal, but just a month or so ago, people found out that a Russian plane was flying near Hawaii, or not Hawaii, excuse me, Alaska. And so just a reminder that this does happen. Like, the U.S. carries out a lot of these missions against China or in the Black Sea on Russia's eastern border, but we also do it on the Pacific border. Before I wrap up today's show, I want to highlight this article, new in the American Conservative. It's absolutely amazing, by Ted Galen Carpenter, titled "Making Ukraine a NATO Member in All But Name." And in this article, Ted goes through and kind of explains how from 2008, when the Bush administration first moved towards making Ukraine a NATO member, how the status of Ukraine, in the American political sphere has a de facto made them a NATO member. Now, I guess there are slight differences, like, with the annexation of Crimea and Ukraine not being a full NATO member. This, maybe would have been more complicated if they were. At the same time, in the U.S., we constantly we must defend Ukraine. There's no question that we have to defend Ukraine from Russian aggression, even though they're not a committed treaty member to the United States or anything like that. The U.S. is selling them weapons like they are a committed ally to the U.S., when again they're not. And even though there's very nefarious elements of the Ukrainian armed forces, including former members of the Azov Battalion, which is this neo-Nazi group, right? And certainly the Ukrainian president, the current president, Zelensky's, moving towards and trying to push closer to NATO membership. And the U.S. has been, willing to leverage its relationship with Russia and France, or not Russia, excuse me, with Russia, but particularly actual NATO allies, France and Germany, who haven't wanted the U.S. to develop these ties and have such close security relationship with Ukraine, and yet the U.S. has, forced the entirety of NATO in the West into that direction, but, particularly in the U.S. And so, anyways, I really recommend that people check out this article and read everything that Ted has to say. But it was a really great article on the Russia issue. I wanted to bring it up.